Hello, welcome to the first ever episode of the Mix 6 podcast with your host, me, Tom Pinks, the content manager at The Mix, the leading digital support service for under 25s in the UK. I am very, very grateful to kickstart this new podcast with a very, very special guest. That's a lot of verys. His name is...
Owen Wood from season 4 of Races Across the World. Hello. Nice to be here.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for the invite down. This is only done like one podcast before, so... Yeah.
So have I. This is it.
Oh, there we go. We're on the same level then, so that's good.
Owen, spoiler alert, was the winner of this year's BBC's Race Across the World, as you just said. Did you just announce that you were the winner? Did I just give that away?
No, it's been out for months. Don't worry, you're all good.
If you haven't watched
everyone
it,
knows by now. Everyone should know by now.
Exactly. And also, fun fact, he is probably the first trainee pilot that managed to travel across the whole continent without using a plane.
Just, apart from the little bit between South Korea and Vietnam.
Of course.
Yes. But that was allowed. That was allowed, so that's fine. We'll ignore that bit.
No planes, no phones.
No credit cards.
No credit cards. Does it feel quite nice to be back to reality in a way?
You know what I really enjoy? I know my partner Alfie, who I did it with, my travel partner, he hated not having a phone. I loved it. It was such a nice detox from everything. Like, social media now consumes everything. Like, I can't tell you how relieving and like nice it was to just not have that with you. You know, you're forced into that situation and you just kind of have to get on with it. But, you know, it shows how resilient you can be when you're kind of put into that situation. So it's nice.
You're here today for our first Mix 6 podcast as our new ambassador for the Mix.
Very exciting.
How does that feel?
Yeah, good. Like, obviously, I knew stuff would come from the show. You know, people are interested in doing like promotions or adverts, but an ambassador, you know, from, you know, a digital charity like yourself was nothing I had on the cards, but, you know, can't say no to that sort of opportunity.
So I can't say this without it sounding dramatic, but it's essentially one guest, 6 questions, 30 minutes. Okay. And that's essentially what it is. We are going to kick off with the Quickfire 6. So these are very...
First answer comes to my head.
Exactly. Just so the listener can get to know a little bit more about you.
Perfect.
Are you ready?
Go for it.
Number 1, indoors or outdoors?
Outdoors.
Instagram or TikTok?
Instagram.
Favorite sound?
Plane engine.
A plane engine. I bet you missed that, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
Your go-to comfort food?
Domino's.
Oh, wow. Okay. Favorite school subject?
PE.
And would you ever travel across a continent without a phone or a plane again?
No.
There we go.
Absolutely not.
That's it. That's the end of the podcast.
Nice. Quick exit.
No, we're going to get into a bit more of a conversation about why you're here. Obviously, it is amazing that you are an ambassador for The Mix. We are going to be talking a bit more about men's mental health and why that is so important, why it's so relevant today. Your first question is, you talked a lot about anxiety on the show, and you weren't afraid to talk about that.
Yeah.
You've had your own experiences. I wanted to know, what does anxiety mean to you personally?
So, you know, anxiety, the way I would sum it up is it's an emotion that doesn't really care who you are, doesn't care where you are, what you're doing. It can kind of present itself at any time, no matter what situation you're in. You know, it doesn't give a damn about what you're doing, where you are, who you are. It will just present itself and you're left to deal with it.
It's funny how you said emotion. So would you say it is the same caliber as, I guess, as love or fear or can't think of another emotion now, but is it in that same category?
I'd say so, yeah. Like, you know, emotions come and go, but anxiety, I feel like a major difference between, say, an emotion like happiness, sadness, is anxiety it lingers for a long time. Like, you can be happy and still have anxiety. You can be sad and still have anxiety. You can be excited, but that kind of underlying base emotion of anxiety can still kind of be there.
It just won't go away.
No, exactly. Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. Question number 2. Can you tell us a time when you first realised you had anxiety? It was like, oh, okay, this is something different. What is it?
So for me, obviously, I brought it up on the race, but like that transition from primary school to secondary school, so going into year 7, that was when the main sort of worries that I was started experiencing, first came on. So anything from worrying about being late to school to, handing homework in that was wrong, or not doing well enough, or, letting my parents down, or, that people not being proud of me, anything in that range I was worried about, and just got so worked up over it. And those kind of emotions and thoughts carried on from year 7 into year 8 into year 9, and they slowly faded. But like I said earlier, that underlying emotion was still always there, and it still popped up when I least expected it.
So it sounds like there was sort of like a whirlwind of external factors that were contributing to this anxiety.
Yeah, I'd definitely say, like, going back again, like, it's an underlying emotion. I feel like it's part of who I am. You can try as hard as you want to overcome it and get rid of it, but it's ingrained in who I am. I'll always be a more anxious person, I feel, but that doesn't mean I can't get over it and I can't deal with it. There are ways of coping with it and dealing with it, like I have done, but I'm different to everyone. You might have a different emotion that is kind of who you are. Everyone has something that they are. And
we're going to talk about how you've owned anxiety in a minute and what it's taught you. I guess when I came up with these 6 questions, I knew a bunch of other questions would come from your answers.
Yeah.
And just to take it back to school, was it something that you knew that you had? Did you, because you knew you had it and you could feel it, could you see it in other people you were at school with?
I think, I feel like I was good at spotting it, but that also presented another worry, as in I didn't see many people that were like me. So obviously there was the odd person here and there that I could see, okay, they're showing the signs that I show when I'm anxious, but there wasn't many of them. A lot of my friends didn't really show that, those signs of anxiety. So I was like, am I kind of alone here? Am I the only one experiencing this? And in a way that actually made it harder, because then you've got that feeling of, why am I like this? Is it normal? Like, should I be going through this? Like, is there something wrong with me? It kind of creates that sense of overthinking, which is often linked to anxiety. Like, overthinking and anxiety come hand in hand. And that's kind of, it kind of spirals out of control, if you know what I mean.
They're like best friends.
No, literally. Literally like best friends. Yeah, I feel like you can't have one without the other,
I also, and I still do, deal with anxiety, and I completely resonated with what you said there about the overthinking complements anxiety, and then vice versa. It was only until I started talking about it, like yourself, that you sort of gained an understanding of it, and you sort of got back control. But for a while, it was quite a lonely journey. Was that the same for you?
Definitely. Like, going back to saying, like, I didn't see it in a lot of my friends. I've got 2 younger brothers as well. I was like, they never kind of had those struggles when they were at school. So I was like, is this normal? Should I be feeling like this? And it was just hard to know what to do about it. So that's when I kind of, start reaching out to other people. Like, there's support at school from teachers, and then obviously my family always knew what was going on. So that support is really what helps you get through it, because if I didn't ask them for help, then I'd just be all alone in it and I'd be stuck.
It sounds like you sort of took it upon yourself it's like a problem, and you were like, I don't know who else can help me with this, so it's probably up to me to try and sort it.
You kind of have to, like, you can either, let it get the best of you and you'll just sink in it, or you can kind of stand up to it and rise above it. And that's, the decision I made, which isn't easy. It's so easy to kind of just accept that, all right, I feel like this, I'm going to feel anxious or depressed for my whole life. I'm not going to do anything about it. But the minute you kind of see a glimmer of hope, or like a light at the end of the tunnel, that's when you're like, hang on a minute, I can do something about this. So why wouldn't I?
I really like what you said there about that glimmer of hope. Sometimes you just need that.
That's literally all it takes. Like, literally anything, just like a compliment from someone during the day, like literally the smallest thing, and it can turn your whole week, month, year around.
And I think that's a really good segue to the next question then. In what has anxiety actually taught you, if anything?
I'd say it's taught me that it doesn't need a reason to happen. Sometimes, like I said, you are who you are. You can be a more anxious person like myself, or you're not. Like, it doesn't need a specific reason. You know, you could have the perfect life, whatever that is to you, and you can still have anxiety or be a more anxious person. So it's just taught me that, you know, it doesn't need anything to trigger. It can just happen.
It's almost like a sense of acceptance.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think accepting it is very important, because you've got to realize that, right, this is who I am. This is the situation I'm in. You know, I can either rise above it, like I said, or I can let it get the best of me. You know, that is just who you are. Like, everyone's different. Everyone's got their insecurities. And that was one of mine that I needed to overcome. Yeah. You know, I think the term anxiety is thrown around a lot. Like, you know, you can have very mild anxiety, like the odd worry here and there, or it can be, you know, a full-on anxiety disorder, like a mental health issue. Personally, myself, like I've said this a lot, like I never got diagnosed. I never labelled it as anxiety, because I don't want that to kind of encapsulate who I am. I didn't want that label. That's just me personally. A lot of people want to get diagnosed with, you know, whatever it is, anxiety, depression. I've always been like, if I have anxiety disorder, that's fine, but I'm not the kind of person who wants to get diagnosed, because I don't want that label hanging over my head. That's just how I am.
So it's interesting that you mention labels. I guess it's an ongoing conversation. Are labels actually helping people? Are they providing a sense of clarity about, this is what I've got? Or is it actually detrimental to people? And are you in that camp? The detrimental, you feel like it's not, that having a label, having a name to it isn't the best way to go about things when it comes to anxiety?
For me, yeah, like I just don't want the label or the thought. Like, for a lot of people, they want to know for sure, because then if you have, like, you know, say depression, there's lots of medications you can take. A lot of people be like, right, I want to get diagnosed, and then if I do have, say, depression, then I can take this medication and get rid of it. That's absolutely fine. But for me, you know, it's hard to explain. Like, I've just never wanted that label, like, because I don't want it to be kind of sum up who I am. You know, if I have anxiety disorder, that's absolutely fine. But getting it diagnosed just isn't important for me. Like, for a lot of people it would be, and that's absolutely fine. Like, if you want to get diagnosed, if you want a solid answer, do it. If that's best for you. But for me, it just wasn't a big deal. I think what it was for me is when I was younger, like I said, in year 7, 8, 9, it was such a big part of who I was. Like, a lot of people at school probably knew me as the stressy one who would get upset over everything, because that is who I was. That was my personality back then. And I think because that my life revolved around that then, I don't want it to now. And I feel like having that label, I don't want that to be, even if no one else knew it, I'd know it if I got diagnosed or had that label. So I just don't want my kind of world or my thoughts to be revolved around that, because I feel like that's not who I am anymore. You know, I've worked hard to kind of overcome that and deal with it. So I feel like I don't want to have that label. I don't want my world to revolve around that. I'm past that point in my life.
Yeah. You're taking back control. Exactly. In a way.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, literally.
Yeah. It's, I found it quite funny that you said, at school you used to be a stress head, and you were walking around all stressed. Yeah. You definitely didn't come across that like that on television.
I mean, that's really encouraging, because, you know, I feel like I've come a long way from year 7 to now, but, you know, having other people kind of confirm that shows that, like, okay, you know what, I have actually done a good job. You know, I'm never too proud of myself. Like, if I've done something, I'm like, oh, I could have done this better, that better. But this is one of the main things where I'm like, right, I started at point A, that being year 7. Point B is, you know, start a race across the world, as you say, you know, and I didn't come across as, like, you know, a really big ball of stress. So yeah, it shows that I've kind of done that journey and come a long way.
100%. I guess it feels like a full circle moment.
Yeah, no, yeah, it really does.
Looking back at who you were in school, and I guess just there in the middle of Asia, in the middle of nowhere, thinking, oh, wow. We always say it's quite cliche, but we always say, like, oh, 10-year-old me or 16-year-old me.
That question was asked all the time in the race, and they were like, oh, what would 10-year-olds say about this? And 10-year-old me would be like, I have no idea why you're doing this. Like, this is the least you thing ever. Yeah. But I've gone there and done it. So, you know, it shows some character development.
100%. We're talking now more about mental health as men. We're both here talking about mental health. So let's talk about it a bit
Okay.
more. What do you think are those main barriers that are preventing other men talking about their mental health?
I think the main barrier is not many men do it in the first place. You know, I feel like it's a bit of a snowball effect. If a handful of people talk about their mental health, their anxiety, their worries, you know, another handful of people do it, and then another and then another. It just kind of takes that few people to really talk about it. And that's really what started happening. You know, you see on social media, Instagram, TikTok, all the time, the kind of stigma is being broken down. You know, that wall and that barrier is slowly kind of fading. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. You know, it was almost frowned upon, I feel, for men to talk about their mental health, because it's not a manly thing to do, whatever that means. You know, I feel like there is certain things that are considered manly. I've never really understood what that means. Like, what nothing's manly or womanly, whatever. Like, you know, you can be who you want, you can do what you want. So yeah, that stigma is slowly being broken down. There's still a long way to go, but it's getting there slowly. 100%. And I hope that kind of me talking about it, well, I know me talking about it and Alfie talking about it and all the others has shown that it is okay to talk about it, and that people will listen to you and they won't just laugh at you.
And I think that's one of the many incredible reasons why you're on the show, in that you weren't afraid to talk about your mental health, and Alfie as well. It felt like by talking about those sorts of things, your friendship went to another level. It deepened.
You know what? A lot of people have asked this question. Like, me and Alfie have known each other since year 7, so he's been there through it with me. He knows what I was like. You know, he was a big support for me. But you know what? We didn't really get that sense of deepening our friendship. I feel like we went into the race as best mates. We've come out of it as best mates. You know, we know everything about each other. We know how each other behaves, you know, this and that. So a lot of people assume that, oh, you must be so much closer to him, but we were already kind of as close as can be. Mm-hmm. So we didn't really develop our friendship, but it didn't need to be. You know, it was at a good level where it is at, and it still is now. So
going a bit off on a tangent here, and definitely away from the 6 questions, which is what the whole podcast is about. But I was just interested in finding out, did you always speak with Alfie about this sort of thing, like what you were going through at school with your anxiety, or was it not until like your later years of your friendship that you were able to talk about this sort of thing?
I think, you know, the conversation couldn't really be avoided when I was in school crying and he was like next to me, seeing that, like, you can't just ignore that. Like, so obviously, we used to talk about it, but I feel like from what I remember when I was in year 7, I wasn't really that in tune with my feelings. I was still young, like 12, 13 when you were in year 7. So I didn't really understand why I was feeling like this and kind of what the feeling is, if it would go away. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it was quite hard to talk about it then, because he was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of anxiety, is like, I don't know what's wrong. Sometimes I just feel like this and there's no reason for it.
Obviously, we were talking just a minute ago about how having anxiety can feel like that lonely journey. So I personally felt like I couldn't really talk to anybody about it because I didn't think anybody else was going through it. As you said, we've come a long way in the last 10 years, and I think we are heading in the right direction. What do you think comes first? Is it understanding anxiety or just talking about it without properly understanding it?
Talking is definitely just the best way to just start, like just talking to anyone about it. Like I said, I didn't understand how I was feeling, why I was feeling how I did when I was in year 7. So just talking about whatever's at the front of your mind is important, and just getting it out, because often talking about it can almost lead yourself to understanding what's going on. You kind of like, you're talking about it and you're almost explaining it to yourself whilst you're explaining it to a mate or, you know, a family member or someone like that.
We started this podcast with you, the individual, and how you were feeling. Not to get too profound and poetic, but we're going to end at least my set of questions with a wider question. We're bringing it out into the whole world. Mm-hmm. You've traveled the world. You've seen places. You've met different people from different cultures, experienced different belief systems, families. What is the one thing you think we all share, if anything?
I think it's hard to encapsulate everyone into one thing, but the majority of people just like a desire to be happy. You know, like you know, in Southeast Asia, you have people who are like literally have nothing, like literally what's in the small house that they own, if that, and all they want is to be happy. And a lot of time it does come across like they are, even though they have, you know, nowhere near as much as we have, they're still happy. And I feel like that's something we lack. You know, in the UK, we are privileged to have, like, you know, a healthcare system, you know, transport, all this and that. But like, I think you'd find a lot of people just aren't that happy. And then you go to somewhere where they have barely anything and they seem so much happier and just content with life. So I feel like we're, like, especially in the UK, we're always looking for the next thing. Like we're greedy. Like, we always want what's next. You know, you buy a car and you're like, oh, but then I want this, and then you want that. Or you go on holiday and I'm like, oh, but I want to go on this holiday. You know, we're never content with what we've got. But out there, and they've got nothing, they are happy with what little they have. And I think that's something that, you know, everyone shares. Like, everyone wants to be happy.
Completely agree with our culture here in the UK. It's like, got the car, don't like the car anymore, or want another car.
What's
or
next?
Want a bigger car.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like a lot of anxiety to me.
Yeah, it is a worry to have, like, people are just constantly looking for the next thing, or like looking to impress someone that doesn't even care. Like, yeah, I think we just need to focus more on the now, what you've got, instead of worrying about what might happen, what might not happen, because it's just a waste of brain power.
It really is.
It's not even worth it.
100%. So they're all my questions. I've got a mystery question. With every guest, for every episode, we ask young people what they would like to ask you. We had an abundance of questions come in, some that we can't air, but we went with Ayana's question, which I think is such a beautiful question to end on. It brings us full circle from everything that we talked about. Our question from Ayana is, did the show Race Across the World, did it change your perspective on life? And did you learn anything about yourself?
So I wouldn't say it changed my perspective on life. You know, I've been to Asia once before, a few years ago, so I kind of knew what it was like out there. But if one thing it kind of made me realize is, like, just to live in the moment, like, be more grateful for what you have. Like, on the race, we were rushing from place to place, and it was so hard to just appreciate where you were. Like, we were at Mount Fuji at one point, even though we couldn't see it very well because of clouds. But we were just, me and Alf were just like thinking about, right, next bus, next train, money, this, accommodation, whatever. And then you look around and there's just Mount Fuji, and like the amount of people you were like, I would literally kill to like go and see that. And we are literally stood at the base of it, and we're just thinking about this, and this. And of course the race is important, that's why we're there. But I really prioritized from the start, just really taking in where I am and just living in the moment and not stressing too much about the future, even though it was a big deal, just kind of taking that step back.
Amazing. Owen, I just wanted to say a huge thank you.
No, thank you.
For being part of this podcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Something new, so can't complain. Can't complain.
We couldn't have thought of a better guest to kick off the Mix 6
I appreciate
podcast.
that. Thank you.
So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Take care.
And you.